No middle ground, Golan Heights 1973. So this is a war game about the northern section of the Yom Kippur War. We are gonna have a player controlling the Israeli forces responding to the Syrian attack, and then once they have responded to that, pushing back and trying to drive their way towards Damascus to threaten the opponent and make them regret the moment they attacked. It is a two-player game, but it is also perfectly playable by a single player controlling both sides at the best of their possibilities. This is because there is no hidden information, because there is a random activation of units through activation cheat pool. So a lot of surprises, a lot of unpredictable elements that you will have to deal with even if you control both sides of the conflict. The game came with the Against the Odds magazine. It's an issue from some time ago, but it's still available. Everything is still available in the age of the internet. So this is a perfect game for the confusing days that we are, for the confusing periods in history that we are going through right now, with social distancing being the recommended approach. You have a magazine, so you got something to read while you're there alone in your house or just with your family, and then you got a game that you can play again by yourself without spreading the contagion to other fellow wargamers. Now, the map is a paper map, as you can expect, and it makes sense from a game that comes with a magazine and represents the era of the conflict. It is very readable, very functional in that sense, no complaint there. As for the color, I can't help but thinking Golan Heights, Red Planet, War on the Red Planet. I wish they had used more yellow than orange, but that's what we got. The game comes with 3 scenarios. Each scenario will take place in this area of the map. The Syrian units will start next to the anti-tank trench here. A small number of Israeli units will be defending here. Most Israeli units will enter the borders reinforcements from supply hexes, and they will try to defend the line as the Syrian units try to drive towards supply points, because those are the main objectives that players need to control or to conquer or defend to win the game. Then we have a second scenario, Objective Damascus, in which actually the Israeli forces will be pushing towards Damascus. This time the Syrian forces are the defenders. You also have a campaign game which combines the two. Starts from here, sees the first initial Syrian push and then the other push in the opposite direction. Now, as for the counters, the game also comes with nice, thick, professional counters. The counter holder you see here is not included in the game. I added it as I do with all of my wargame magazines, if nothing else, because that gives a shape to the counters. Otherwise, you have a bag that just sits in there in the Ziploc bag with the magazine. So I have the counter holder, of course, is closed. You fold the map, you put this one on top, put everything in the Ziploc, and you have something you can easily stack horizontally or vertically on your game shelf. The counters, you have a silhouette representing the type of unit represented by the counters. Say here we have armor, we have artillery, which is also indicated by the bombardment value there. The other values that you have here are combat factor and movement factor, respectively. Some units can only be used in defense during combat, that is indicated by yellow being the color of the combat factor. Then we have supporting units. We have air units. Both players will receive a variable number of air units during the game, and they can be used for different things. Artillery and air units are very flexible, can be used, artillery can be used to attack directly, to lend support during combat, they can be used to cause interdiction. The air units also can be used to cause interdiction, can be used to support combat, in which case giving a shift to the left or to the right on the combat table. So another important factor element is the band that you see on top, which is coded by color and then by name of the group that represents. So here we have the 240. In this case, we have the 9 mechanized, etc., etc. And I'm just gonna put some units sort of randomly on the board without following really any setup instructions or anything like that, but just to give you a sense, because I think it's more pleasant that way. We have some fortifications printed on the board. More can be built later in the form of improved positions. And so, suppose that here we go, more or less. At some point in the game, that's where we are at. But let's put also some Israeli forces, because otherwise it just feels unfair. Now, a turn starts with the replacement and with the reinforcement phase, where you're gonna have reinforcements indicated on the schedule entering the game. Later in the game, when your units, some of your units have been eliminated, then you can start bringing them back, but again, you need to roll a die and you don't know for sure when you're going to get them back. After the reinforcement and replacement phase, you have the air and artillery phase, in which again air units and units with an artillery factor can perform different actions. Some can perform then, say when you're placing interdiction markers on the board that will slow down movement of the opponent. In other cases, you can choose not to spend them during that phase, but save them for later, say for support during close combat. Then you start drawing activation chits. You will have a number of activation chits. They go in a cup. They are drawn randomly. That one of them was not an activation chit. You draw them randomly, and then you activate the group. Oh, say, for example, look at that. We just drew the chit for that one. Units that activate can move, and so we move them up to the full movement allowance. For example, you had to stop when you enter a hex adjacent to an enemy unit. That is, all units project a zone of control in the hexes surrounding them. That's very important, because in different phases, one player will definitely be the attacker and one player definitely be the defender. It's always one player pushing to reach the side of the board controlled by the opponent, pretty much. So whoever is the defender really will want to use zones of control to slow down the opponent, plus interdiction. So you move, as simple as that. Then you have fire combat, that is, units of the activated group can perform fire combat. Fire combat, you roll a 6-sided die, you add and subtract possible modifiers, and if you rolled equal to or lower than your combat factor, you inflict a hit on the opponent. The first hit disrupts an enemy unit, so you flip it to the other side. As you can see, it reduces movement considerably. Also, units that have been disrupted can only do close combat, they cannot do fire combat anymore. And they stay like that until they're rallied. At the end of the turn, you will roll to determine which of your disrupted units are flipped back to the other side. If a unit that is already being disrupted takes a hit, well, too bad, then they are eliminated. And so fire combat is really deadly, because it's not that hard to inflict disruption on an enemy unit. Artillery can attack during the bombardment phase. Again, it's the same idea. You're trying to, you confront the result, you compare the result with the artillery factor, and if you hit a fresh unit, you disrupt it. Bombardment from artillery cannot destroy a disrupted unit, but fire from a land unit during the fire combat phase can do so. After the fire combat segment, the units that did not fire, that did not attack in fire combat, can close assault. You need to be adjacent to the opponent. In this case, you switch to a different combat system. So fire is about the target number you're trying to roll equal to or lower than. Close combat is the mother or father of a lot of classical wargaming, which is combat odds. You total the combat factors of the attacker, you compare it to the combat factor of the defender, you turn that into odds, say 2-to-1, 3-to-1, so on and so forth, and then you look at the combat table. The page here's a little glossy, but I think you can see. Apply modifiers, say column shifts, that can be given by ground support from artillery, that can be given by other types of things, say the attacker has combined arms from the same formation, and so on and so forth. So you find the modified column, then you roll a die, you modify that also based on, well, terrain, support, disruption condition. Night turns, 1 turn every 3 turns is a night turn, and there's no air support during air turns. When all is said and done, you will have a column, you will have a line, you cross-reference, and then you apply the result. The result to the left of the slash, apply to the attacker, the other ones to the defender. So it can be a mix of retreat, it can be retreat, disruption, bloodbath, which it's similar to what back in the day we used to call exchange. The defender loses a unit and the attacker needs to lose at least an equal number of strength points. Then, however, bloodbath, the defender can keep losing units and forcing the opponent to lose units that are involved in that combat. It's pretty much magnified exchange result. This is how it works, really, pretty much. Units will keep activating when their formation activation chit is drawn, and again, each time that you activate a formation, they move, perform fire, resolve assault. When the enemy hex that you're attacking, so the enemy hex or the defender is vacated after combat because the enemy retreated or was annihilated, then you can advance after combat, and that's pretty much it. At the end, when all formations activated, you have the rally segment, you roll for each disrupted unit that you want to try to rally. There's a supply phase, I didn't mention that, it's early in the turn. Again, you need to make sure that your supply lines don't go through enemy zones of control that have not been denied by the presence of your units, otherwise you get penalties. And this is the general idea. Activate units in random order, push towards the edge of the opponent when you have the initiative. After a while, Israeli reinforcements will come in, and there's just no way the Syrians can hold the line, and they will need now to start defending, and now it's the Israeli forces pushing back. And at the end of the game, victory is determined in different ways depending on the scenarios, but usually speaking, control of locations on the board is a major factor in determining who wins and who loses the game. So, No Middle Ground is overall a really nice game. It's fun, it's entertaining, it is intro level. If you're a new war gamer, this could be your first war game, maybe the second, but definitely an early one in your path to become an experienced, seasoned, and grumpy grognard, because that comes with the turf. Actually, the game is simpler than it may look at first. As I was reading the rulebook, I started seeing all the possible missions that you can do with air power, with artillery, and the game may feel a little overwhelming for a new wargamer that way, but in truth, those elements are pretty simple. Heck, the first time that you play, if you're a new wargamer, just, I won't say don't use, but underuse those things. Use the air power only to give shifts, and the artillery only to do attacks, for example, and it will work perfectly fine. And then you add more levels of complexity as you go. It is nice that you have different scenarios because you can play 2 shorter games, and those 2 shorter games are really very different, not just because one side is the attacker and one side is the defender, but because one is more about pushing a compact line, the first scenario, that is being compacted as the Syrian forces advance, and the other one is more about defending in depth, and so you have a completely or fairly different set of objectives and dynamics as the Syrians. They don't have that much there's not a really wide front to defend, but the Israelis are coming in force, and so you're sort of trading blood for position and deciding where you want to retreat and where you want to take your stand. So I really like that too, and it's also nice, of course, that you can put them together in a single campaign that will follow that general historical trend, the back and forth, that backlash, that rubber banding, if you want to call it that way, due to the different schedule of reinforcements, of course. The second part also has different rules or extra rules, so it could be good if when you start playing the game, if, oh well, you play the campaign game where you play the first scenario first, and when you play the campaign, then in the first part of the game you only worry about the rules for that part, and then you add the other ones later. One thing that is strange is how deadly and safe firepower is, as opposed to close assault, which is really dangerous and fairly ineffective. It's hard to mount attacks that are more than 2-to-1, 3-to-1s, and those are still pretty dangerous for the attacker. Once you realize that, and then you just start using firepower overwhelmingly for attacks. Even with modifiers, I have a chance in 3 to inflict a hit on you, and 0 chances of getting damage. And look at the column of the close assault. In that same situation, maybe we'll have a chance in 3 also of giving you damage, but also an equal or higher chance of taking a loss. So why would I do so? And that's a weird thing. I found myself, once I realized that, almost never using close assault. I think the few times that I used it, honestly, was because I wanted to, for the sake of variety, for the sake of, well, let's see what happens. And it really happened, and I did not regret not using firepower instead, from the point of view of the advantage of that side. So that is strange. Again, I would have liked it if the game had both modes of combat, but then I'm thinking there are a lot of war games in which you only have one mode of combat, in which, say, you only have combat odds, or you only have firepower that does direct attacks against a target number. If you have both, maybe they don't both work very well, but I don't think that to be a deal breaker. I just thought it's a game that pays particular attention and puts the emphasis on firepower. And that's it, it still worked. It is great, especially for the difficult times of world pandemic in which we live, that we have a game that can be played solitaire, because it works perfectly well that way. Chit pull mechanisms, the mechanics of pulling the chit and activating groups of units in a random order, to me, works very well. You have other random elements, such as, of course, the combat results, but then the rally result that will tell you whether or not the unit comes back in full force. So there definitely is enough randomness and unpredictability here that you can play the game by yourself, best of both sides, best of their possibilities, and you're gonna see the historical situation, you're gonna gain some insights about the topic, the theme of the game, and also you're gonna have a good time playing what is overall a strong war game. Also, you get a magazine, so don't go out and buy it. Also, I don't know that many people buy Against the Odds in actual stores, but if there is one in your town, I don't know, call them and have it delivered to your front door, and then they honk and you pick it up. Order it online and then disinfect the package or something. These are times in which you really should practice precautionary staycation. Try to do so, and as you're killing time, a way of killing time could be, of course, to play circle war games, and no middle ground would be a good option. It's a solid game.